Welcome back, Focus Learners. Today, we're tackling a massive, incredibly complex topic, the absolute latest updates in the treatment and classification of leukemias and other myeloid neoplasms. We're drawing directly from the dense, data-packed Chapter 19 updates, and my goal for this explainer is to really just cut through all the noise. We're going to distill these major medical advancements into three distinct paradigm-shifting points. By the time we wrap up, you're going to have a crystal-clear understanding of this entirely new era of precision oncology.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Here's our agenda for today. First, the new genetic map. Second, the targeted therapy revolution. Third, tracking measurable residual disease. Fourth, the transplant lifeline. And finally, we'll bring it all home with three high-yield takeaways.
Starting right off with Part 1, the new genetic map.
So, back in 2022, the medical community fundamentally redrew the boundaries of how we actually classify myeloid neoplasms. And frankly, it changes everything about how we approach this disease. We saw the release of both the 5th edition of the World Health Organization classification and the International Consensus Classification, or ICC. Now, historically, acute myeloid leukemia, AML, was defined by a really strict, somewhat arbitrary cutoff. You needed 20% or more blasts in the blood or bone marrow. The WHO decided to retain that strict 20% threshold, but the ICC, they actually looked at the genetic data and introduced a completely novel category called MDS/AML for patients with 10% to 19% blasts. You might be wondering, why does this matter? Well, it's huge because it shows us the genetic definitions are actively challenging those old arbitrary numerical cutoffs. The underlying biology of the disease is what's driving the diagnosis now, not just what a pathologist happens to count on a glass slide.
Which brings us perfectly to our second point, the targeted therapy revolution.
That profound shift in how we classify the disease genetically directly unlocks, literally, our second main point. Because once you have a better map, you can finally send in highly specific tools. To truly grasp this revolution, I want you to keep a lock-and-key analogy right at the front of your mind today. For decades, standard induction therapy for AML was essentially the exact same for everyone. We used broad chemotherapy, which is effectively like dropping a heavy bomb on the bone marrow and just hoping the normal cells recover faster than the leukemia cells. But today, because of genome-wide sequencing, we've identified over 50 recurrently mutated genes in AML. We now view these specific genetic mutations as unique biological locks, and rather than using broad chemotherapy, we're developing highly precise pharmaceutical keys designed to fit exactly into those specific locks.
And when these precise keys are put to the test in clinical trials, the results are absolutely practice-changing. For example, gilteritinib, which is a highly selective FLT3 inhibitor, proved so incredibly effective in the Phase 3 Admiral trial that it's now the gold standard for FLT3-mutated relapsed refractory AML. But even more exciting right now is the advent of menin inhibitors. Drugs like revumenib and ziftomenib have recently received FDA approval, and they are essentially newly forged keys specifically for patients whose leukemia harbors a KMT2A rearrangement or an NPM1 mutation. I mean, this is targeted therapy in its absolute purest form.
Consider this your ultimate cheat sheet for the modern relapsed or refractory AML landscape. It's wonderfully straightforward. If the genetic target is FLT3, your key is gilteritinib. If the disease expresses an IDH1 or IDH2 mutation, your keys are ivosidenib and enasidenib. And for those KMT2A rearrangements or NPM1 mutations we just talked about, you're reaching for the menin inhibitors, revumenib or ziftomenib. We test the genetics at diagnosis, and then we test them again at relapse, purely because finding these specific locks dictates your entire treatment strategy.
Let's move on and see how this all builds into our third main point, tracking measurable residual disease. Okay, so we've mapped the genetics and we've targeted the mutations, but how do we actually know if the treatment worked in the long term? This is where measurable residual disease, or MRD, comes in. It's defined as residual disease that is detectable after therapy using highly sensitive techniques, even in the absence of morphologically detectable disease. Essentially, a patient can undergo treatment, get a bone marrow biopsy, and have a marrow that looks morphologically clear under a standard microscope. They look like they're in complete remission, but looking structurally clear doesn't mean the disease is fully gone at the microscopic, molecular level.
Now, what's really fascinating about the number 1 million is the sheer scale of our microscopic detective work today. Thanks to next-generation sequencing and multi-parameter flow cytometry, our sensitivity has reached astonishing levels. We aren't just looking at a few hundred cells anymore. We can now detect a single aberrant, mutated leukemic cell hiding out amongst up to 1 million normal cells, literally 1 in a million. And finding that single cell, finding that MRD, is one of the most powerful predictors we have for whether a patient's cancer is going to relapse.
So what does finding that 1 in a million cell actually mean for the patient? Well, the clinical impact is massive. First off, detecting MRD predicts much higher relapse rates and worse overall survival, plain and simple. But more importantly, it guides our next moves. Take the BMT-CTN 1506 Morpho trial, for instance. It proved that for patients with FLT3 mutated AML who went through a stem cell transplant, using gilteritinib as a post-transplant maintenance therapy actually eradicated the MRD detected by next-generation sequencing. That finding was so impactful that the NCCN guidelines were immediately updated to recommend gilteritinib as the preferred maintenance agent in this specific scenario. MRD isn't just a passive prognostic tool anymore. It's an active, treatment-driving biomarker.
All right, shifting gears to part 4, the transplant lifeline. Now, here's the tough question we have to face. What happens when our standard therapies, those upfront induction chemotherapies, just fail? The harsh reality is that the likelihood of a patient responding to standard salvage chemotherapy in these cases is terribly low. And that's exactly where allogeneic stem cell transplantation, or allo-SCT, steps in as a critical salvage therapy. Even when primary induction fails completely, providing a brand new immune system from a donor can offer a 20% to 25% long-term overall survival rate. It is absolutely our heavy artillery.
But before we put those brand new donor stem cells in, how hard do we push the body? That depends entirely on what we just learned about MRD. Before transplant, a patient undergoes conditioning, which is basically extreme chemotherapy and radiation to wipe out their existing marrow. We have myeloablative conditioning, which is maximum intensity, and reduced intensity conditioning, which is much gentler. The BMT-CTN-0901 trial gave us a brilliant insight here. They found that if a patient has detectable MRD before the transplant, using that gentler reduced intensity conditioning results in significantly higher relapse rates and decreased survival. Meaning, if that microscopic disease is still hanging around, you absolutely have to use the intense myeloablative conditioning to give the patient the best possible chance of survival.
And that brings us to part 5, 3 high-yield takeaways.
So the crucial point is that every single stage of care is completely interconnected now. If you remember nothing else from this explainer, burn these 3 points into your memory. Number 1, our classifications have completely shifted. The 2022 WHO and ICC guidelines prove we now rely heavily on genetic maps over simple blast cell counts. Number 2, we're living in a targeted therapy revolution. Menin, FLT3, and IDH inhibitors are the precise new keys designed for very specific genetic locks. And number 3, measurable residual disease is the ultimate compass. Our ability to detect just one leukemic cell in a million dictates everything from transplant conditioning intensity all the way to post-transplant maintenance therapy.
Which leaves us with this one final provocative thought to ponder. If we're already at the point where we can detect a single rogue cell hiding among a million normal ones, and we have targeted drugs ready to neutralize those specific genetic mutations, how will these rapid advancements completely individualize cancer care in the next decade? We're moving away from treating leukemia as a broad category and moving rapidly toward treating your specific molecular variant of leukemia. Thank you so much for focusing in and learning with me today. Keep asking great questions, and I'll see you in the next explainer.